just to give a little bit of context to today's webinar, and obviously we're going to have a presentation from CADA. So as you may be aware, the South Yorkshire Chambers have been working on the local skills improvement plans, and the key purpose of the local skills improvement plan has been to put employers at the heart of skills provision and give employers a voice. This has been a huge project. Sorry, I'm just going to keep admitting while I'm talking. This has been a huge project that's involved consultation with employers all across South Yorkshire, with colleges, UTCs, independent training providers, local authorities, mayoral combined authorities. So it's been a huge team effort. And there's been a number of outputs from those local skill improvement plans and recommendations that have helped inform skill strategies at local authority level and mayoral combined authority level. And one of the outputs that we've had the opportunity to do has been deep dives into industry sectors. So we had a deep dive into the manufacturing sector, and that was based off a number of interviews that CADA conducted. We have got today's, which is around the construction sector. So we are going to hear from CADA, who are going to talk us through what they uncovered during those deep dives. And then, as I say, there's an opportunity to have questions and answers at the end of that. This is the first webinar in a series of webinars. And so we'll keep you posted of the next topics and the next dates for those webinars, and we can update you that at the end of this call. I think that's everything from me. So I'm going to hand over. And I will just keep my eye on the chat. So if you do have any questions, you're very welcome to pop those in the chat. If there's anything you do need clarifying, feel free to raise your hand and we can come to you. But we'll try to keep questions for the end, because inevitably you might have a question that's actually going to be answered on the next slide. So I will now hand over to Jack and Carl at CADA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Lou. Hello, everybody. I know some people on the call, but not everybody. I'll just introduce my colleague.
Yep, I'm Jack. I'm a senior consultant at CADA, so I've been here about 3 years now, and I sort of help lead on the interviews on this piece of work, so interviewing construction firms from around South Yorkshire.
Thank you. So my name's Carl, I'm a director here. For those of you that don't know us, we're an economic development consultancy based in Sheffield and Gateshead. There's 15 of us. We do economic strategies, research, impact studies, that sort of thing. And this is part of a wider contract where the Chamber asked us to look in a little bit more detail at some sectors of interest. So we started obviously with manufacturing because it's so important to our sub-region. This one was on construction, and the ones we're currently doing, I'll come on to later, cover things like aviation and some other service sectors, so I'll tell you about that. So this is the construction sector report. These are little micro studies, really just to give you some current impressions of what HR managers, owner managers, leaders within different sectors are thinking about skills, thinking about their workforce, and the sorts of level of optimism. We've tried to pick companies that have got something to say. We've tried to reflect on ask them really to just look deeply about what they feel is going well, what the challenges are, and they're designed to just inform people's work, really. The construction went down reasonably well and seemed to resonate, and we've got Nikki taking that forward with different leads of construction who will go forward with providers and reflect on those findings. We've taken a similar format. We designed an initial questionnaire very closely with providers about what they really wanted to hear. Inevitably, there's only so much you can get into an hour-long interview. With 29 questions, we cover all elements of recruitment. But if you could just go back one stage, Jack, thanks. What we tried to do is just get a bit of background on the business, and we do categorize them and things like that afterwards. Understand where their future priorities are, think very much about their current skills, ask them about training provision and their habits and their interactions with providers, current and future. And then we ask about employer engagement. And then at the end of this, I'm going to sort of just reflect on next steps and take any questions from you, if that's okay. So by way of background then, this is the second in the series, as I mentioned. Our target was to get sort of 20 to 30 employers, so they're in-depth qualitative interviews. there are bits of quantitative data in there, but it's not a kind of, landscape review of sort of the volume of numbers coming forward, sort of micro detail of numbers. This is very much big impressions about the future, the sector, providers, those sorts of things. The idea is so that we've got some up-to-date info, because a lot of the intelligence we get comes from official data sources. We do get the chamber surveys, but we don't always get the insights from what employers are thinking now. We spoke to 23 firms for this one, and clearly they can't represent the whole sector, and they just offer a snapshot of requirements. What we've tried to do a little bit is identify where the firms in the report, if you read the report, where the firms, are really big, massive, progressive firms, and where actually they're smaller companies where their training needs are very, very different, as important, but very, very different. So we have tried to differentiate that, but inevitably it's quite difficult to make sort of generalist assumptions. So I do encourage you, if you're interested, to read the report and, ask us about what we found. We've got a list of the companies. It's fair to say probably this one, there's some big hitters on there, house builders, a lot of the big ones. It is an important sector for us. So we did speak to some SMEs, but I wouldn't say it's a full profile of the sector, but we've got a pretty good handle on it. The idea is that we inform the work of what's going on. We know there's been some investments, for instance, in Barnsley College on modern methods of manufacturing, and Gavin from the college has offered to speak to construction leads about what this report might mean. So Barnsley College will help us land it with other FE providers, private providers, that sort of thing. This study wasn't about quantifying the sector. You can find facts and figures on it, but I did just want to emphasize, I guess, a bit that it really is an important sector for us, and it really does impact on everyone from homes, schools, hospitals, offices, almost everything we do. And we know there's a lot of infrastructural investment. We know there's a big push around housing. We know that our infrastructure in South Yorkshire and our housing's out of date. So there is really a sort of fundamental need to invest in construction. Another thing to say, I guess, is it's really changing at a fast pace. So we've got these off-site manufacturing facilities. We've got an emphasis on whole life asset performance. Equally, we have, it's a real mixed industry. So the sector's structure and volatile nature makes it a really complex and multifaceted industry. So it has contracting services, product manufacturing, professional services. And we spoke to companies that have the full gamut of these. We've got planning, design, construction, and a really complex supply chain with trades, materials, and services. So the supply chain involves the coordination of materials, information flows between subcontractors, suppliers, main contractors. Whenever we look at these impact studies, I'm often surprised by the sheer number of subcontractors on a project. I did a project for Mercedes over in Stockport, and I think there were 123 subcontractor work packages covering all areas of development. So it never ceases to amaze me how complex the industry is, and that does make planning for skills, quite a logistical challenge and a complex challenge. So the first section then of we asked them to look forward, people, and the managers, and give us their impressions. They told us that people-centered cultures are really important, and they're cultivating this through flatter management structures, very, very hands-on leadership teams. Predicting, assessing, and navigating future business priorities, when we asked them about that, was quite a strategically important but difficult task. The sector is so susceptible to sort of policy, planning, legal and regulatory change that it is quite fast changing. There are requirements in contracts these days for business to really future-proof what they do. So they've got net zero goals, they're bringing in digitization and AI, and that is changing training needs. One of the big challenges, as we know this sector, particularly at the trades end, is there is an aging workforce. So there is a considerable replacement demand. requirement. Many are embracing these new digital technology advancements, but one of the things that people raised with us was that actually the integration of lots of different data management systems can be a real challenge. So there is a need over the next sort of 5 years or so for upskilling transition periods and embedding some of the change management and bringing some of these systems together. So more seamless interoperability would help reduce cost, and that's one thing that they told us. So sustainability is being driven by policy, legislation, client expectations, and a rise in the expectations of younger generations. So green skills are no longer a sort of discrete role. They will be blended into all stages of the business. And our survey work with employers has shown there's generally an openness to this, even in the trades. Just to comment on the aging workforce and replacement demand, and the larger firms do have particularly ambitious growth targets being driven by some of the housing growth and retrofit. The smaller companies we spoke to really focusing on sort of profitability and overcoming cost and supply chain pressures. Just to add also to the aging workforce thing, that is manifesting itself in some of the trades roles such as bricklayers, roofers and plasterers. And they're trying to bridge these gaps through diversifying the knowledge base and using apprenticeships and new technologies and things. One thing that I did want to mention as well, people did mention soft skills and the importance of communication and work attitude. And many believe that some of the industry skills can be taught in-house, not the basics of the trades, but some of the practical skills in-house. Companies are thinking about biodiversity more, the bigger ones in particular, and that's in terms of conservation and construction, so heritage buildings, things like that, the materials used and embedded carbon, and the resources used to sustain buildings in their use and effect. So people are starting to think about pollution and things. So sustainability related apprenticeship offers around retrofit advice, installation and coordination would certainly be welcomed by some of the people we spoke to. So the green technologies, they require expertise in things like installation and maintenance, things for solar panels, air source heat pumps, and timber frame designs. And I know some of the colleges I've been to are already doing this here and now. Technologies like automated rotating systems, AI-assisted digging equipment, hazard detection cameras are being piloted. They can enhance the precision of the work, improve safety, but do require skilled operatives. So automation is revolutionizing back office processes like bid writing, cost estimation, and project planning. So AI specialists, data analysts, and sustainability advisors are becoming more common and will become more common, they told us. But there's some way to go before this fully embeds across the sector. And again, there probably is a large small firm divide here. Companies are exploring how they can streamline operation and free up accuracy. So lots of the routine tasks that are being done could be done automated, freeing up time for strategic and creative tasks. As in some of the other more traditional industries, there is some resistance to change, perceiving it as costly or complex. So there is a need to kind of demonstrate the benefits of this. And we are finding even small firms that are using sort of innovations in AI and drone technology and things like that. So that's a little look to the future from our little cohort that we spoke to. We've got some quotes here just reflecting some of that. And then I will just, I won't read them out. I'll just give you a minute to read them yourselves. Really, they just draw on, what we just talked about. There's a lot more quotes in the report, so we'll send that round afterwards if you haven't seen it already. I think, is it you now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just looking at sort of when we spoke to companies about current skills and needs. So There are obviously some challenges faced by the sector, but in terms of apprenticeships, there's generally some optimism about expanding apprenticeships in terms of offering entrants with affordable, credible options and sort of good prospects. There was also an element around green apprenticeships, was something that's becoming more common and more sought after, both by the firms themselves and by prospective employees. Carl touched a little bit on younger generations having bigger demands when it came to sustainability and green skills, and apprenticeships as part of that, which is obviously mentioned here. So in the next sort of 3 to 5 years, the volume and type of apprenticeships will evolve in response to a number of drivers, which, as referenced, sort of green technologies, sustainable construction, and digital design, sort of reshaping the type of apprenticeships that individuals and firms are looking for. Companies sort of cited that they like a bit more better publicity of apprenticeships, particularly for women in senior roles and sort of on-site roles as well. More information on how to sort of effectively support apprenticeships would be sought after too. Change management obviously relies on effective transition systems, so sort of clear, transparent communication, engaging employees in the process. Part of this was sort of integrating apprentices as well into smaller teams and finding sort of suitable providers was mentioned. In terms of specialist roles, so Carl's already touched a little bit on sort of skilled trades, but skilled trades and project managers are some of the most difficult to fill by the companies that we spoke to in the current climate. And there's also this general issue around the perception of construction as an industry. So within sort of younger generations, employers are still finding this quite a big barrier in terms of attracting new talent into the sector. So there needs to be a little bit of collaboration around reshaping narratives. I know someone I spoke to just today said that they mentioned to their daughters who are just finishing their A-levels whether construction would be sort of sector they look to go into, and they immediately sort of said no, like that's not something that I'd ever think about, that doesn't really suit me. That's like, you know, high-vis jackets and long days out in cold weather, which is not necessarily representative of the sector as a whole, and certainly the type of roles that companies have available in the ones that we spoke to. So companies have efficient recruitment processes. So these include things like initial introductions to new recruits to assess sort of workforce requirements. They do a lot of introducing employees to the business a little bit before they take them on, sort of a few days to acclimatise to the role with the team, to get acclimatised to all of those. But in terms of sort of challenges, firms do face a few recruitment hurdles. Often one that was mentioned by quite a lot of the employees we spoke to was sort of losing out to larger companies when it came to SMEs, those with sort of deeper pockets and stronger brands. Employers are responding to these, the smaller ones, in a variety of ways. This is things like utilising apprenticeships, sort of increasing the online visibility of roles. There's an acknowledgement that online presence is more of an important thing nowadays. That historically, a few employers referenced us, that word of mouth had been quite a common recruitment process for construction firms, and trying to sort of bridge that and move to a more online method was something that's helping them to compete with the larger employers. Career development processes are well embedded through sort of goal setting, personal development plans, performance-led cultures. Hybrid working, obviously with the sector itself, not always possible, but where it isn't, companies are offering in-kind benefits or flexible working practices where suited. And then obviously mental health is a prominent issue within the sector. There's no sort of hiding that, but companies are addressing it and they are sort of cognizant of it. So there's a lot of mental health initiatives being brought in, things like mental health first aid training, private healthcare packages, support lines were quite a common citation, and firms are sort of developing these employee councils and benefits packages as well. And some more quotes there, which will give you a minute or so just to read, just to summarise that. See, mental health, green technology, and then sort of that narrative and impressions of the sector from those and the younger generation.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Jack, but my impression was the larger firms had better developed well-being measures because partly they could afford some of the big schemes and things like employee councils, benefit packages. So the smaller firms had to be more creative to create people-centered cultures through sort of social events, recognition, that sort of thing. But there's a definite shift and understanding around well-being in the workplace, isn't there? And quite an appetite from it at all levels, I think. I think things, COVID was a landmark sort of event for employers to reflect on workplace well-being. Thank you for that. Is it me now? So training, so looking at tomorrow's employees then, clearly there's a mix of training models used, some delivered by external providers, soft skills and leadership often internally, technical or very specialist training often outsourced. For the larger firms in particular, digital platforms are increasingly used for routine self-paced learning. They prefer to work with trusted training providers that meet their skill needs. Cost was less of an issue where there was better understanding that can match their compliance rules. There's a lot of sort of checks and balances in the sector and meet their business goals. So clearly where they're heading as a sector. Obviously different construction firms focus on different segments of the construction market. So those requirements do differ depending on whether it's residential, commercial, some cover them all. The development of early career leaders is really important. They told us that it's a really tough job managing these projects. You've got multidisciplinary teams, really tight parameters of time, budget and quality, labour market constraints. So that requires a certain person with a certain degree of tenacity, financial acumen and practical hands-on experience, a real problem solver. In terms of what they like flexible modular training formats. So, virtual sessions, ideally short courses that minimize disruption. They are happy for people to go off site, but, not kind of extensively. And I think, on-demand training is quite popular. They like trainers with real world experience and get better visibility of training options. Equally, providers told us in Barnsley the week before that actually there's a process for getting trainers up to scratch with proper teaching abilities and things. So there is a demand for that. They do like government-backed workforce development schemes and would welcome more support for training. So upskilling and CPD is addressing some of the specific challenges around sort of digitisation and sustainability, with leading companies tending to set the standard. We did find that AR and VR starting to transform the workplace a little bit. This sector's probably more advanced than some other sectors. It offers a risk-free hands-on experience, although the sort of costs and practicalities come to the fore. So just thinking about it, some people told us that they offered virtual site walkthroughs and drills that improve safety engagement and skills development, and that was also being used by some smaller firms. They can be used, virtual technologies, to visualize complex structures and enhance operation. You could showcase projects through virtual simulations, such as sustainable buildings or architectural designs. So the creative potential of construction comes through when we talk to them about sort of AR and VR. And clearly these tools, they felt aligned with the expectations of younger workers, and perhaps these tools could be used to help position the industry as a really modern and exciting place to work for, a broader segment and cohort of the population. Is that us done, or have you got some more quotes? Sorry, yeah, some quotes there. That was the point about working with providers. Teaching specific skills. And making the workplace an exciting place to be.
And then obviously,
this is the final section.
The final section around employee engagement, in terms of how they're engaging with their labour market, also with providers. So Construction firms are very open to working with groups further removed from the labour market, so prison leavers and veterans. This was quite a widespread practice. There's activities such as work readiness initiatives were being used rather than direct recruitment, was slightly more common. Most of the employers we spoke to who weren't doing this said they would be open to. They just wanted a little bit of greater awareness and publicity around these sort of activities. There's sort of, in terms of industry-wide skill shortages, it does mean that employers' recruitment practices have shifted slightly, and those we spoke to prioritise attitudes more over qualifications. If prospective employees were sort of a right fit for the business and have that willingness to work, sort of resources to help employers effectively support those further from the labour market would be welcome to sort of ensure smooth workplace transitions. We've talked a little bit about young people, so engaging young people early was prioritised. That's through interactive and relatable experiences, showcasing the sector, to try and come back to that point I mentioned about sort of younger generations' perceptions maybe of the construction industry as a sector, sort of involving parents and teachers as well, who are quite influential in young people's decision making at an early years, and educational institutions as well. Sort of promote these diverse career pathways will hopefully improve recruitment volumes. Employers also cite the importance of strong relationships with providers, which in terms of collaboration, which will help also elevate career opportunities, and informing curriculum design was something that a lot of employers were open to. Quite a few had taken part in doing that already, but they're quite open to doing that, going back to sort of showcasing the benefits of the construction sector. And obviously sectoral and supply chain collaborations around training and skills are commonplace. And there's very little reticence around engaging with competitors and supporting each other, which is quite unique to the sector. In terms of sort of the formal interactions, in terms of collaborations, there was things like supplier drop-in days, employers sit on forums, and there's a lot more informal interactions that take place through sort of knowledge sharing, capacity building sessions, particularly with smaller subcontractors. But employers would sort of welcome further opportunities to engage in local networks. There were some that weren't too aware of any in the area, so we'll be open to hearing more about that.
Thank you.
And a couple more quotes there, just around the sort of skills shortage point, the support needed, yeah, and around the sort of next generation.
Yeah. So we continue to disseminate the construction work, and we're happy to share any of the slides. There are some notes in the slides that you may have heard us talking about there. We've got 4 more reports to do, and we are doing these ones simultaneously. So just remind me when we're reporting. Is it April and
April, May, and then into June?
April and May for these ones. So if you're interested in sustainable aviation, particularly around the development of the airport, and that really is a mixed sector. I spoke to a freight forwarder this morning, had a fascinating discussion about what the airport might mean for that Sheffield business. We're also well underway with leisure, tourism, culture and sport, and retail and hospitality, which is throwing up some really interesting findings. Often a sector that gets left behind. And then finally, we're going to do financial and professional services, not to leave out the bean counters. That's it. Just a list there of the consultees. So we've got some small ones in there. We have got some people that do, very hands-on stuff and actually employ trades like OVO spaces. Some that are really at the cutting edge of sort of house building. We've got sort of global companies in there as well, and some very local sort of smaller contractors. So quite a mix. Some fascinating insights. And people generally have been really open to us. Lou, Dan, that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for giving us the time to go through it steadily and slowly. It was refreshing change, because we're often like a 5-minute item on agenda and we have to kind of race through the headlines. But hopefully you got a little bit of the richness of what those 23 managers and leaders in our local area are thinking now.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, really insightful, and as you say, it's really helpful to have the time to actually digest it. We had a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question was from Andy. Andy, would you like to ask your question verbally, or would you prefer me to read it out from the chat? It might be.
No, I'm
better
quite
for you
happy to.
Yeah, converse.
I'm quite
That'd be
happy to
great.
read it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I first read the report, I was a little bit surprised that it only referred to what appeared to be large employers. Now, most construction companies don't really employ that many boots on the ground. They use supply chain of SMEs. So I think this report could have been quite skewed by the responses given by large employers who have the resources and back office function and can put in apprenticeship training plans. But really, a lot of the work that's done on site is delivered by Joe Bloggs Construction. So I think you've missed quite a chunk of the construction sector out of this. And I think really it potentially skewed your report. I work for a large training provider with a large adult skills fund and skills bootcamp contract covering South Yorkshire. And sort of the first I knew about this report was actually getting a copy on our desk. So we've not really been included in it, yet we're delivering best part of probably £2 million worth of training in South Yorkshire. It's just a thought.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah. Dan Lou, I don't know if you want to come in on sort of the process of how we engage people. We tried to get, a mixed group of people. They were nominated from the chamber and from outside. We did speak to companies that did have trades and some smaller people. It's probably a fair criticism that we could have done more SMEs. To some degree, we were driven by, who we spoke to and who we were, put in front of. But yeah, it wouldn't be inconceivable for us to top up with a few smaller employers just to boost the sample, Andy, and get some impressions. We have done some bigger surveys in other areas with smaller employers. To be fair, I found similar things in relation to sort of sustainability and things like that, and sort of openness to the sector, to technology, accepting the fact that the situation is quite different for smaller employers. So yes, we tried to pick that out where we can, the differences between large and small, but it's probably a fair criticism actually that we could have spoken to a few more micros and very small ones. If Dan and Lou are up for that, I'd be up for sort of topping up the sample and just seeing if there are any particular issues.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add, the only point I'd make was the volume of people that we contacted to take part in this research and how difficult it was in terms of conversion rate. There were a significant number of smaller organisations that we requested, that we put forward, and you've probably got the numbers on it, but in terms of how difficult it was to get people to commit and to commit the time to do the interviews, I don't think it wasn't through want of trying, if I'm honest. I don't know if you would add anything, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's really important to take a step back and just sort of contextualize the local skills improvement plan and the spirit of the work we're doing on this. So, local skills improvement plan, very, very briefly, new construct of the previous government designed to add value into the skills planning system in ecosystems like South Yorkshire by moving some of that work a bit closer to sort of private sector proper via employer bodies like chambers of commerce, not exclusively organisations like us across the UK. To throw in kind of new insight, some kind of thought leadership and sort of business proper, and then work really collaboratively with friends and partners, organisations like Simca, providers and so forth in the ecosystem to try and bring that stuff to life. So LSIP proper, that research period probably goes back 12, 18 months ago now, engagement with several thousand employers across South Yorkshire, every sector, every company size, every age of trading, etc., to produce quite rich, quite detailed data about that kind of skills need across the piece. What we've been doing sort of subsequent to that is these quite time limited, by design, by dint of resource, whatever else, quite small little dives into sectors. And what we're absolutely not trying to do with these, and the spirit of our relationship with partners, the spirit of this work, is not at all to pretend that these are exhaustive readouts of a sector skills need in any way, shape, or form. What these are a series of conversations with what we think are interesting and interested employers in that space who have something interesting to say, something that might feel a little bit zeitgeist for their kind of sector, and then kind of landing this within the system, um, with partners who we hopefully work closely with, who will get on with each other to say, and here's some new bits of stuff you might not have come across previously. We hope it makes you think. I hope it kind of piques a few thoughts or new conversations, but it's not intended to be like a total readout. It's to be read and understood in context of everything else that's pouring in from that sector or elsewhere in terms of describing demand from businesses. Um, and that's the spirit we're trying to land this with. So I think there's really kind of legitimate critique and pushback on this, Andy. But I think from our side, it's like this isn't intended to be like a total readout. It's a snapshot in time, and it's like a collection of thoughts from 20 to 30 businesses, as Carl said, that we hope add some value into a richer conversation.
Thanks, Dan.
That
Keith,
answer your question, Andy?
Yes, I suppose it does, but I still think you're missing a trick by not including more SMEs. I think what they will tell you is very different to what Bowmer and Kirkland will tell you, or Henry Boot Homes.
Would you be able to introduce us to a couple?
Don't see why we couldn't.
And then I'll take you up on that offer, and I'll add some SME insights into the report. How about that?
Yeah, good.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Keith, did you want to come in on this point, or is it a different point?
No, thanks, Lou. Just wanted to sort of firstly say thank you for pulling the report together. I agree with what Andy was saying there, but what I'd also like to say is actually, this is part of a collective challenge that we have. What we know about SMEs is that they do make up a large part of this industry. And therefore, what we need to do is work together to try and get more of them engaged in things like this, because I think it would really add value. Just sort of, again, we work purely on the apprenticeships with the apprenticeship hub, but there's so many other different streams of opportunity that maybe the smaller employers don't actually understand and don't know about bringing resource in. Nationally, there's a shortage of 250,000 people in this in the construction industry. It's a collective problem. But I think, again, things like these reports, whilst we're understanding the limitations of the reach, I think they're really, really useful. But I also think it does give us an opportunity to maybe talk and collaborate a little bit more about how do we actually systematically reach more people and re-engage them in a system that they maybe sort of have not got the capacity to lift their heads up and to sort of engage with, because I just think there's some threads there that we could pick up on. Thank
you, Keith. Samantha, you're next in the chat, and actually, Keith, obviously your South Yorkshire Apprenticeship Hub. Samantha's question was around apprenticeships. Samantha, are you happy to come in and ask your question, please? And then Nikki, I've seen you pop in the chat. I'll come to you next.
Absolutely, and thank you, Andy, for using Henry Boot alongside Bowmer and Kirkland, because we are a little bit smaller than Bowmer and Kirkland, but thank you very much. The challenge that we've got is Henry Boot is predominantly construction management. So we have plant hire as construction, and we've also got Henry Boot known for its construction, but we don't employ tradespeople as such. I think we've got maybe 8 who do various roles, but predominantly we work with subcontractors. So in terms of skill set, what we're looking for is anything that is around the project management or the planning or the design. And then we've got the support functions behind it. So in terms of apprenticeships, we're paying so much out in terms of apprenticeship levy and CITB levy on top. But actually some of those skills that we're needing are more of the short course type rather than the 3-year apprenticeships. So we're losing out on so much money because the apprenticeships are not available. CITB don't fund it unless it's a construction training course, directly construction impact. And then so there's all the courses available, but that costs more money for us. So we're losing out. So actually, what is available to us in terms of funded training for our people to give us those skills in the modern day construction that we're needing?
Thank you.
All of silence there.
I was going to say thank you, because I think it's a really important point. Keith, I know you're not responsible per se for apprenticeships in that area, but I didn't know if you had a view with them. You obviously being in that world.
There's a few things just to mention there. Fully understand what you're saying there, Sam, and I'd love to have a more in-depth conversation with you about this. I think what we've got to do is keep an eye on the growth and skills levy, because that may actually help in these areas. So there is conversations about there being shorter courses or shorter apprenticeships. There are other funding streams available as well that can part fund things like that. So in the region, we've got things like Skills Bank, which again maybe be able to sort of provide a contribution to those skills areas. But it is true that some of the apprenticeship standards are quite hefty and long, and when you are sort of bridging skills needs, they might not be the perfect fit. But actually, that's the system at the moment. We just need to keep an eye on what's happening within the levy and see whether that's an opportunity to maybe reshape some things. But as I say, just the other funding that is available, which part funds part of those programs, might be worth exploring as well.
Thank you, Keith. Nikki, you wanted to come in.
Yes, so
let us know where you're from as well, Nikki.
Oh yes, sorry, I'm from the University of Sheffield's AMRC Training Centre, but I've been in South Yorkshire and in the FE sector for many years. So thank you. I'll try and be quick. So first of all, there are going to be gaps in who we've been able to speak to. So I sit on the LSIP board. And there's a range of private providers, colleges, universities, and chambers and other stakeholders around, and Simca around the table. So the biggest thing about this was about us being able to get together as a collaboration. So Samantha, I think it'll answer some of your kind of concerns as well. So there's a couple of things here. We use these papers, and what we need to do, because we're asking employers constantly what the skills gaps are, what they need. So our plan is to take these papers and any other research that we've been doing over the last couple of years and turn that into an action plan, turn that into action. You've told us this, we're going to try and do this. One of the things we all recognize is that training providers, however big or small, in isolation are never going to be able to do this alone, right? The funding is a stop-start mechanism, and we're used to working within that. What we've got to do for employers of all sizes is make sure that we hide the wiring in terms of what people need. Can't do it as individual providers on many occasions. So the whole point in this is bringing together the collaboration of the wonderful training providers that are in this region and finding solutions. And there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 solutions for people. And it's for us then to ensure that our employers understand both the funding and where the training is in place. And if 3 providers have to get together to get the right training, short, sharp, or long, like an apprenticeship, so be it. And that's what we need to do. So the whole point in this wasn't to have an answer for everything, but it was to start a conversation, strengthen our collaboration, pull it together for the benefit of employers and the individuals that want to train.
Thank you, Nikki. That was a really helpful perspective and really great overview there. Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left of Q&A before I hand over to Dan. So was there any other questions with regards to the presentation or anything wider? Anybody else want to come in? I think we've got everybody in the chat. Just if anybody else wants to ask anything or make any comments, and just raise your hand. If we've got anybody. Okay. That's obviously testament to the quality of your presentation, Carl, that you've answered all the questions that people had as you've gone through.
Yeah. And just to say then, we will do a little top up with some smaller employers and just reissue that report within the coming weeks. We'll do it fairly quickly.
Smash it.
I'll get in touch with Andy and just cover that little loose end off.
That's
I'm not
brilliant.
sure
Yeah.
it will change the fundamental thrust of the findings, but it will add some new micro insights about the barriers, for instance, around training and the practicalities of it for smaller employers.
Absolutely. And it's really helpful to have that feedback back so that
It is
we
actually,
can
yeah,
reflect and adapt to ensure that, we're taking into account people's perspectives.
Yeah, and Andy, you weren't the only one. Someone raised that last week, so we tried to address that within the report, but it sounds like we need to go further, so we will do.
Thank
That's the
you.
purpose of these presentations, to just test
Sense check.
it. So thank you for that comment.
Absolutely. Right, I'm going to hand over to Dan now. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou, and thanks everyone for joining us. I think my sort of concluding thought on this, I think, Lou, and I know we've had this conversation previously, is there feels like there is sort of tension and jeopardy in our economy at the moment when it comes to, on one side, that suppressed business confidence, the impact that we know national insurance contribution and national minimum wage is going to have on sort of profitability and sort of confidence of our employer community, and across the piece, whether that's micro, small, or large business. And then the ambitions that we have for our region as articulated within the South Yorkshire Skills Strategy and the kind of the hard and complex things that are going to be done to kind of engage our variety of our communities with work and tackle productivity gaps and so forth. And so within that sort of context, I hope what colleagues sort of understand we're trying to do with the local skills improvement plan, with these reports, the bits of insight we're sharing, is just try and enrich some of the conversations that partners in our region are kind of having. There is no panacea here. There is no monopoly on great ideas. There's no monopoly on who's kind of got the best or most representative insight. What we're trying to throw up through the local skills improvement plan, through these sort of mini deep dives, if that's not oxymoronic to kind of describe them in that kind of way, is just stuff that piques further conversations, that makes us think, that brings people together and sort of drives some new kind of connections. So with that in mind, I hope colleagues have kind of appreciated this report, appreciated this webinar. It's the first one for the LSIP. It's a little bit of a pilot. Just in terms of full disclosure, we did hope to bring some of this to life with a employer speaker in addition to Carl and Jack, but unfortunately that person had a bereavement yesterday, so I had to duck out at the 11th hour, which is absolutely understandable, of course. As we bring these webinars to you in the future, we will have a variety of interesting speakers, particularly those from SME communities, just to sort of bring the data to life for us in this forum as well. And it's something that we're trying to do not just on the skills pieces of Chamber Network. We also run something called the Quarterly Economic Survey, which covers a variety of topics, provides updates in terms of business confidence, business sales, investment intentions, and so forth. And so if you've not experienced all those webinars as well, we'd encourage you to book on. And we hope that what the Chambers are trying to provide in terms of feedback loop from business to our public sector partners is landing well and is welcome. In terms of the upcoming webinars, the next one of these, we're just finessing the date. That's likely to be the week commencing the 12th of May. And then we have a bit of an aviation special, deep dive on skills needs associated with reopening Doncaster Sheffield Airport. That webinar will be on the 29th of May. And then that one on the professional services sector will be on the 17th of June. And then the only other thing just to flag from the sort of LSIP program of work that we know is adding value and people are appreciating and enjoying around knowledge and skills exchanges. And that's where we are bringing together the region's sort of business advisors, so people who work for chambers, for FSB, for TBI, etc., local authorities, universities, FE sector, private providers, anyone in that kind of economic development, business support, skills kind of space, bringing them together periodically for a bit of a teaching on what the region skills offer looks like. And the intent behind that is the more we know about what is happening in a messy and complex landscape and bringing it to life with the kind of value add and the high quality stuff that's actually out there, the more that the business advisors, people who work for Chambers et al. Know about, and they can drive some better and warmer targeted referrals into the skills system and hopefully drive that uptick in workforce development that we all want to see for South Yorkshire, our businesses and our people. So that's it from the kind of the Chambers side. We appreciate everyone joining us and making the time. Any feedback on this webinar be gratefully received. And if there's sort of lines for inquiry you would like us to pursue going forward, or if there's areas of opportunity for collaboration that you can see here, please reach out to me, my colleague Harrison, to Lou, to Carl or Jack at CADA, and delight to pick up a conversation and see how we can help. But that's it from my side, Lou. If there's any final words from you, we'll say thanks and goodbye to everyone.